I would like to now invite Mick to speak.
Thank you. I'd just like to pass my condolences to Rodney and Barbara, and also pay my respects to elders past and present. I'm, I guess, a recent immigrant into Australia, probably one of the few here that was welcomed. I came over from the UK in 2003, brought my family over, and one of the first confronting things, if you like, I came from London, a very multicultural society, came to live in Greenwood in the northern suburbs. My son and daughter went to school, and there was only, out of 500, there was only 2 Aboriginal children that went to that school. And the amount of abuse that those 2 Aboriginal kids got from the rest of that school was incredible. And my son said, who's here today, he could, in London, you would not say those things openly because you'd be lynched, not just by black kids, but by white kids as well. They would not accept the level of racism that came out. That was our first introduction to Australian school and Australian society. And I've been involved in the last 4 to 5 years in the Deaths in Custody Watch Committee that monitors or attempts to monitor the horrific deaths, mainly of Aboriginal people in prison. But I got involved because of the campaign with regard to the death of Mr. Ward, the Aboriginal elder who was killed in the back of a prison guard van on his, as he was arrested for drunk driving. He was killed by the neglect of the guards and the neglect of the state government and the neglect of the company that ran that particular service, G4S. So I got involved 4 or 5 years ago in that, but I have been a lifelong anti-racist. I've been involved in campaigning against racism since I was 17, and I'm now 52. My first experiences of racism in London was the death of 13 black men who lived a black family who lived in a house in Deptford that was firebombed by the British National Party members. That was in the late 70s, early 80s. I then came across another example of racism where a black woman who was pregnant was brutally assaulted by white people, again in southeast London. The baby was kicked out of her stomach. The baby died, and I still get emotional about this. The police arrested her and her mother because the attackers blamed them for starting it, and didn't take her to hospital for 24 hours. The other thing, and I mentioned this one because again in the 1980s, a young black guy called Stephen Lawrence was murdered. He was knife attacked at a bus stop, again in southeast London. That young teenager is very similar to what Rodney was explaining earlier. He was brutally attacked by a gang of white racists who were linked again to the British National Party. It's a neo-Nazi organisation in Britain. And they attacked him. The police did not follow it up, did not investigate it. In fact, they started investigating him, his family, saying that they were thieves and robbers. They've had to wait. Fortunately, the good news on that, and I'll come back to some of these things later, the good news on that is that the two people who killed him were convicted recently and were sent to prison for life. That was 18 years after
They
the
brought
event.
Nelson Mandela into that. I
Yeah.
read in the paper on TV.
So
Mandela had to come into it.
so that's why I became an anti-racist, why I've been a member of the Socialist Party for the past 30 years. But also, we need to set up an organisation, I believe, and we can start from small groups. We need to set up an anti-racist organisation. Initially, we're suggesting West Australians Against Racism, because we need to take up the individual issues that Rodney's outlined, the individual cases where there's individual attacks. We need to take up the racism that's perpetrated by the governments, the state, and in individuals that go around attacking people just for the colour of skin. And we need to do that. As a white person, we need to do that because it destroys our community. If we allow these racists to get away with it, they will destroy our community, they will destroy our jobs, they will destroy our homes, because that is the intention of people like Barnett, and unfortunately, not just the Liberal Party and the National Party, but unfortunately the Labour Party as well. Because they put profit and the development of big business before the interest of ordinary people. To be able to do that, they want to divide and rule the community. And one of the tools that they use and constantly use is racism. This country, Australia, was born with the establishment of capitalism and the profit system, and the main tool it used when it first came here was the establishment of capitalist agricultural policy, of taking the land off of Aboriginal people. For capitalism for the market to develop, it uses the tool of racism. It always has, and it always will. And I mentioned capitalism because not often in these discussions do we actually mention the system we live under. I'll just develop the point that, yes, we have to combat the individual racists. Yes, I think we have to combat the state racism and combat racism generally in the community. I believe if we don't do that, then the community at large will suffer, and we will see a rise in we will see a rise in racist attacks and racist incidents. And Ben is absolutely right when he says that Barnett and others have unleashed a wave of racism through this offer of $1 billion. And let's just be clear, because Marion explained this to me. Unfortunately, she can't be here tonight. Marion said that what is the offer? The $1 billion, it sounds a lot of money, doesn't it? It sounds a lot of money. But when you take that $1 billion divided by 35,000 Aboriginal people, works out at $29,000 per Aboriginal person. Can we change the lives and the poverty that Aboriginal people live in with $29,000? Now, this government is not going to give $29,000. The deal isn't to give each family 29,000. They're going to put 15,000 in a trust fund, and you can get that in 10 years plus interest, and they're going to set up programs with the other 14,000. But who's controlling that money? The control of that money is still going to be partly in government hands, probably wholly in government hands. They're not giving self-determination to that money. And it is the biggest swindle. I would put it another way. If you own your property today in Perth, if you own a house on your 700 square metre block today, your average house today in Perth is something like $535,000 if you want to sell it. You can probably get roughly, on average, $535,000. Here you are, Mr. Barnett, I'm going to give Ben $29,000 for his $530,000 property. You should jump for joy. This is a great deal. Of course it is. Is it? Would any person who owns a property accept 29 grand? And if you actually look at the total land package involved, it isn't 700 square metres, it's acres and acres per person. It is a swindle. 29,000 per person will do very, very little to change the lives, to change the poverty, to provide the jobs, to provide the homes, to provide the schools that are going to be required to bring Aboriginal people out of poverty that they live in. This is a swindle, and we need to go out and explain that this is a swindle. We've got a big job because of the amount of racism that is out there, and that a lot of people do not want to listen. But I think we have to take what is happening out there. I will also say, it is not, racism to me is a deliberate policy of the present governments, both federal Labour and state Liberal. It is a deliberate policy that they use to divide the community. And we should point this out to people. It isn't something incidental, it is a deliberate policy. They use it, big business uses it to drive down wages. The Northern Territory's intervention, that was not about paedophilia in the communities. That was about a land grab of big business, the big mining companies wanting land to develop resources to make huge profits, mainly for themselves. What they wanted was the Aboriginal communities to be forced into hubs and to use them as cheap labour. And they have driven the wage levels down. People were earning $16 an hour prior to the Northern Territory's intervention. Today, some of them are earning as little as $5 an hour. That's Australia today. That's the role of big business. That is the role of capitalism. That is what is behind racism, in my opinion, today. We need to see what the enemy is. The enemy, is not white people. The enemy is capitalism. Capitalism, yes, the majority of people in power are white. But we also see in Africa where the white colonials have been kicked out and there's a layer of black capitalists in existence. It's not the colour of your skin that's the problem I'm putting forward, it's the system itself, and we need to change that system. Obviously, while we're changing that system, I believe we need to fight for every reform we can get. We need to fight for every house. We need to fight for every job. I'll also back up what Tichoni said. I used to work in real estate. I know property managers that would not give houses to people with black African names or to Aboriginal people. They immediately threw it away. My son, when he worked for a service station, was told by his manager, we're not accepting any Aboriginals to work here. this goes on day in, day out, and obviously we have to say no to it. What I want to just end on is we have to build a campaign. We're suggesting to build a anti-racist campaign that can take up individual injustices, can fight for people, can re-educate people, can promote anti-racism. I think, you know, we have to go to all communities. I think we have to go to the Aboriginal community, we have to go to the African community, we have to go to the white working class community, to the builders. And we have to say, it is in your interest to unite with us, because we want to fight for more jobs, we want to fight for more houses, we want to fight for more employment and skills and health services. Unless we unite together against those at the top, we are not going to achieve what we want. There's a housing crisis in Perth at the minute. There's 25,000 people on the Homes West waiting list. They are not going to build any more homes. You have to wait 2 years for a priority transfer. You know, if you're suffering domestic violence, if you're suffering home invasions and attacks, if you're suffering severe medical problems, you're having to wait 2 years. You're having to wait 7 years if you're on the ordinary waiting list. And this government and Labour do not support the building of more council houses, more public housing. They're hoping the private sector will build more homes. That is affecting every section of the community, not just Aboriginals, not just the African